When I ask about sensation in lectures, most people will draw back in their mind to a kindergarten teacher somewhere who taught them about the five senses: vision, or seeing, which relies on the eyes as a sensory organ; audition, or hearing, whose corresponding sensory organ is the ears; touch, the sensory organ being the skin; smell, which depends on the nose; and taste, which has the tongue as its sensory organ. But researchers have noticed that the story is actually more complex because there are two other senses that probably never received any airtime in your kindergarten class, but that you'll read about in Chapter 4. The first is the kinesthetic sense. If you want to see the kinesthetic sense in action, you just need to close your eyes and then, using your finger, touch your nose. How do you do that when you can't see either your finger or your nose? The job of the kinesthetic sense is to help your brain locate your body parts in space. It's the sense that helps you to do everyday things like bringing a cup of coffee to your lips or reaching out to grab a book from a shelf. But it's also the sense that helps musicians who need to move their arms and hands in very specific ways to play instruments. And it plays a role when athletes are trying to catch a baseball or a football. If vision happens in the eyes and taste happens on the tongue, the sensory organs for the kinesthetic sense are located in your muscles and joints. Aside from the kinesthetic sense, the second lesser-known sense is the vestibular sense. The vestibular sense is what allows you to maintain your balance, and so you rely on it every day when you walk from one place to another or land steadily on your feet when you jump. But it also serves you well in challenging situations like standing on a ship that's rocking and rolling in rough seas, walking along a narrow wall or fence, or carrying out a complex yoga pose like this one. Like hearing, the organs that are responsible for the vestibular sense are located in the inner ear. However, the structures in the ear that manage hearing are completely different from those that handle the vestibular sense. Now that you've got a handle on all of the senses and the sensory organs that serve them, I want to go on to debunk a myth that's common out there in the world. Most people think that vision happens in the eyes, taste happens on the tongue, smell happens in the nose, and so on. Put another way, people often think that our experiences of the environment happen in the sensory organs themselves, and that's just not true. As you'll see later in this unit, what we think of when we think about seeing, hearing, smelling, tasting, and so on happens in the brain during the process of perception. It's the brain that sees and hears, smells and tastes, and so on, not the sensory organs themselves. So the question is, what are those sensory organs doing? What's their function? The answer, in a nutshell, is that they're there to carry out the process of transduction. To put it simply, transduction is like a very specialized kind of translation, and so the sensory organs can be seen as very sophisticated translation machines. Let me tell you why you need 7 different translators, one for each of your senses. The processes of sensation and perception fundamentally are all about energy. All of the information that's out there in the world, everything that you take in, everything that eventually gets processed by System 1 and System 2, it all exists as some form of energy. For example, visual information exists as light energy. Auditory information exists as sound waves, which is a form of mechanical energy. Information related to taste and smell exists as chemical energy. But here's the fundamental problem. The brain, which is responsible for interpreting all of that information out there in the world during the process of perception, it only understands one type of energy, electrical energy, and more specifically, electrical energy in the form of the action potentials that you learned about in the last unit. The brain cannot interpret light energy or chemical energy or any kind of energy apart from the electrical energy expressed as action potentials in the nervous system. So for the brain to understand what's out there in the world, it needs all those foreign kinds of energy to be translated into electrical energy. In short, it needs them translated into action potentials. The primary function of those sensory organs, then, is transduction, which involves translating one form of an energy into another. It's the structures on the tongue and the skin and in the eyes, ears, nose, muscles, and joints that allow all of these different types of energy found in the environment to be converted into electrical energy so that the brain can understand and interpret what you're being exposed to out there in the world.